Hello guys, it's Ryan Ho back with another video. Today I'm going to be comparing the Audeze Maxwell to the Audeze MM-100. Now, these two headphones are planar headphones. Planar headphones have a distinct advantage over dynamic drivers in my opinion. They sound more detailed, faster, the notes are played a lot faster and cleaner. You could definitely tell the difference. Now, for me, the Audeze Maxwell is a $300 headphone and it is a gaming headset and it's a closed back planar and it's also wireless. So this is definitely a different type of headphone versus the MM-100 is $400. It is a open back headphone that's kind of marketed for studio use. So it has a more kind of studio flatter type of sound. And yeah, so today we're going to take a look at these two, compare them, see which one's better for you. And we're going to take a look at it at two different perspectives, right? So like if you're a gamer, would you buy the Maxwell or the MM-100 if you want an open back? If you were a studio or an audiophile essentially, would you buy the MM-100 or would you buy the Maxwell? And we're going to do that comparison. So let's first compare build, right, and comfort. So they both use the same headband. And so in that sense, they're going to be pretty similar in that sense, right? So these headbands generally have 3 points of extension that you can use, and it's a kind of one of those, bands that kind of conform to your size of your head, which does make it comfortable, but I do wish they had a little bit more sizing for, other people. For me, I'm lucky it fits perfectly right out of the box for me. I don't even need a change. So it's not really a concern for me personally, but I can see how it can be for other people who try it. Now, the yoke design, everything is pretty similar. I would say for pure build quality, it's definitely the MM-100. You can just look at the grills. They look a lot nicer. They're built a lot better. This is just purely plastic. This has a lot better design in my opinion. When it comes to the pads, I would say that, they're different, but they feel like a similar material. So when it comes to pads, I do like the Maxwells better. They just seem to kind of fit better on my head and they kind of don't really kind of vary. I feel like the Maxwell has less, it actually does have less clamping force. And so my ears kind of shift a lot more where, every single time I put on the Maxwell, my ear kind of goes to the same position and it just fits really well for me personally. So I think the Maxwell, it has a tighter and more consistent fit for me versus that. As you can see, this one actually looks like it has a deeper kind of pad compared to the Maxwell. The Maxwell actually pad is more interesting in the sense that like the back is thicker and the front is thin. The M100 is similar, but I feel like the Maxwell has a bigger differential between the front and the back. As you can see, this back is kind of thick, but then the front is not as thin as it is on the Maxwell. So I do think this one is angled a little bit more in that sense. All right, so now let's move on to features, right? That's the point where, the Maxwell absolutely just blows the MM-100 away in features. It has Bluetooth, high res, it has wireless with low latency with the dongle. You can plug in USB-C, you can plug it analog 3.5, it has a microphone. It has, digital software to EQ. You can set your own profiles in the headphone. It has preset profiles as well. The microphone also has their own kind of noise canceling as well. So yeah, it absolutely destroys the MM-100 when it comes to just feature set alone. And that's not something that, can be undersold because this is also cheaper at $300, right? So when it comes to connection types, these both take the same 3.5 millimeter cable. So you can run them single-ended and they will kind of play from both sides. However, obviously the way that the MM-100 is wired, you can use this balance. So that is an advantage that this has. So it also has dual entry, so you can plug into either cup and get audio from both sides, right? Versus the Maxwell, you only have one point, but you also have much more kind of connectivity. So I wouldn't say it's really much of a disadvantage when you can use it wireless, USB-C, and all the other type of stuff. All right, let's go talk about why you're all here for, which is sound quality, right? I literally tested these for so long going back and forth, but essentially I tested both of these single-ended in wired mode, right, into an amplifier, and I plug in the same spot. So this should be a pretty even comparison in that sense. What I noticed was obviously, the general profile of the M100 is made for studios, so it's more of a flatter profile. versus the Maxwell is a gaming headphone, so definitely a little bit more of a bass boost because gamers like the big boom in the bass, and I like it too, to be honest. And then I do think the Maxwell has a little bit more refined tuning from the mid-range to the treble, but there are some differences, right? So going down low for the bass, I would say, yeah, you're gonna have a lot more fun listening to Maxwell. It just has much more bass quantity that you can hear. Now, when it comes to bass quality, I would say the MM-100 sounds like it slightly has better quality because I feel like the bass, even though it's flatter, you can kind of hear the subtle elements a little bit more versus the Maxwell kind of boosts everything else, so it sounds a little bit more one-notey. Now, I don't think the difference is really that big, to be honest. It's just, they just have completely different like presentation. Like you just have way more bass on the Maxwell compared to the MM-100. This is a preference thing. Like if you want big explosions, you want that flat sound if you're using this for studio use. So, there's just different purposes for different people, right? Now, let's go on to the mid-range. The mid-range is the part where I think it's not really a contest which one is better. In my opinion, I think the Maxwell is better in the mid-range. The reason why is when I compare this, I can kind of hear the MM-100 have a slight recession in, I would say like about 2K, but essentially the voices sound slightly laid back more than the Maxwell. The Maxwell, when it comes to like male, female vocals, they do sound just a little bit more full body. Now the difference isn't major, but I would say there's definitely a noticeable difference. And so I do think that Maxwell just sounds just a little bit more pleasing and a little bit more full in my opinion. So that's why I do think it's a little bit better. The treble is an area where, it can go either way depending on you. I do think the Maxwell has a more balanced tuning between the mid treble to like the upper treble in a sense of like, I feel like when I listen to the MM-100, it has a slight sharpness, which I would associate with like around 4 to like 6K. Around there, it kind of is a little bit more emphasized. But then when you get to like the upper treble, the kind of treble is less emphasized. The notes aren't finished as well on the MM-100 versus they are kind of have more kind of upper treble presence on the Maxwell that's more fitting. And then it doesn't have that little additional sharpness that sounds slightly unnatural on the MM-100. But it's like I said, these differences aren't like huge, but like it's still my job to like, pick them out for you guys. But there's definitely a little bit of that going on. But there's one distinct advantage of the MM-100, and it's really because it's an open back headphone. Open back headphones don't have to be essentially like dampened because a closed back headphone has reflections. They got to add like foam and stuff to stop that from happening. And what that really leads to is there's less air in the Maxwell versus the MM-100. So like air is kind of like the sense of openness and airiness that you get. And I think that quality is really a lot better on the MM-100. I think it is a distinct advantage that it has over the Maxwell. So I do think in that sense, if you're looking for that, it's better. And it does, because it has a little bit more of a treble emphasis, I think most people, if they did this comparison side by side, would say the MM-100 sounds more detailed. And I wouldn't say that's wrong either. But it's, for me, it's like you're basically debating between something that is a little bit more treble, kind of emphasized a little bit, and then you also have more airiness, which is a distinct advantage versus a headphone that seems to sound a little bit more natural and have a better balance. So which one is better? It's hard to decide because there's kind of two different advantages, right? Now the last thing I want to talk about is soundstage and imaging. So soundstage and imaging is a place where soundstage is like a absolute no contest situation, just like how it's more airy. The MM-100 is an open back headphone. It sounds like the sounds literally like protrude out, right? And it sounds like you're more like listening to a speaker. It sounds like you're more at the event. It sounds much more natural. The Maxwell just sounds like a headphone. Like you just know that like, yeah, you're wearing headphones on your head, it sounds like a headphone versus the MM-100 really does extend the sound and kind of immerse you a little bit more into the environment. So in that situation, it's a no contest. The MM-100 absolutely smashes the Maxwell. Now, imaging is another thing. So imaging is interesting because I think both of these headphones image basically the same to me. However, I did have one issue with the MM-100, and it was more of a user error. But essentially, if you use the MM-100, it doesn't have as much of a consistent fit and it doesn't have as much clamp. So when I actually tested this headphone, I actually had my ear basically offset, like maybe back here, and that actually affects your imaging. So when I had it offset, what basically happened was it sounded like the sounds were just off and they didn't sound right, because I tested this headphone multiple times and I ran into that issue because it wasn't in the right place. And then I adjusted it back more to see if that was the issue, and it sounded even worse. And then I realized, yeah, I just need to put my ear like right in the middle, and then imaging was like perfect. I could tell where things were like instantly. But I did run into that issue. So I think if you run into an imaging issue, just make sure you position your ear like directly like in the middle, essentially, to get the best like performance out of that. Versus something like the Maxwell, I just don't have that issue. Like the pads just fit in the same place every time, right? That's why I said this headphone had a more consistent fit, because I've never really ran into that issue using the Maxwell. It just, you know, fits on my head in the right place every time. But that doesn't mean that imaging was bad, right? So for me, both of these are like, you know, when I test imaging, I basically play games like Valorant. Doing deathmatch, you can kind of hear people's footsteps as they're kind of moving across, and then once they like kind of appear, you can kind of guess, like, you know, based off the sound, do I think the enemy is going to like appear in front of me? And it's very, I think it's a very accurate way of testing imaging in my opinion. But anyways, I found them that they both can, you know, tell where exactly the enemy is. Like when they move towards the center, I can tell where they are, so I didn't really have an issue. Now, like, I wouldn't say like they're the best headphones I've ever heard, but honestly, they're way, like, they're just definitely really, really good. Like, I don't think you can complain, like, at all. They're really, really, really good. But I would say, like, the interesting thing is, like, when you combine good imaging with good soundstage, I feel like it kind of magnifies how much better the MM-100 kind of sounds in the general space of, like, how wide it sounds and how accurate it sounds. I do think it does add a lot to the value of the MM-100 over the Maxwell in that sense. Now, to wrap it all up, really, if you ask me which one sounds more detailed, I would honestly tell you, I kept asking myself this question, and I always came down to, like, they both were so close. Like, I felt like most of the differences had to do with tuning mostly, and the fact that, like, the MM-100 is an open back headphone, so it did have a slightly more advantage definitely in the treble because of that. I would say most people doing this comparison would most likely say the MM-100 is a more detailed headphone. I don't think it's by much. I don't really think you're gonna miss out, but I do think like most people doing this would probably claim the MM-100 is slightly more detailed. Obviously, you know, the Maxwell has more features, but you know, there's also a benefit of being like closed back as well, right? Being closed back means you kind of reject the sound outside. So you can really take this, you know, outside and be portable. You can take it on a plane, you can take it outside and just listen to it as a Bluetooth headphone. So it has, you know, a lot of versatility in comparison to the MM-100, where, you know, if you walk outside with this, everyone can hear you, you know what I'm saying? And obviously it's not wireless anyway, so it just makes it just a tad bit harder to use. And the other funny thing about the Maxwell is if you take out the microphone, it actually has a built-in microphone inside this, so you can use it to take calls and stuff even without the microphone plugged in, because it actually has a built-in one too. So it's really crazy just the amount of features and the versatility that you get from the Maxwell. So in conclusion, I do think the Maxwell is easily the better value. It is $100 cheaper, which is 25% cheaper than the MM-100 at $300. It has way more features like wireless, Bluetooth. It has a microphone. It has a built-in DAC amp, so you don't have to buy yourself a separate DAC amp. It literally has just so many features. You have your own EQ as well, versus the MM-100 literally comes with like one cable and the headphone in the box, right? And a bag, I guess, technically. But you know, this is really, you plug and play, and really it is open back, so it does have some advantages over the Maxwell. So I think, you know, for a lot of people who are looking for, you know, studio professionals who want a flat type of profile, the MM-100 is obviously a better choice in that sense. It's as well as having more accurate soundstage. In my opinion, the soundstage sounds a lot more realistic. It sounds more like you're listening to speakers. You kind of feel a little bit more kind of engrossed in the environment. And I think the MM-100 does that. So if you're a studio professional, I feel like you're looking for that. And if you're also an audiophile, you're also kind of looking for kind of that open back nature, that more natural sounding. And, you know, it does actually have more air too, right? So when you kind of listen to it, there is distinct advantages of that I think a lot of people are also looking for the MM-100. And I also do think, like, if you are kind of a working professional or you're an audiophile, you already have a DAC and amp, so like the cost of buying something like that really isn't going to bother you because you probably already have one, versus like if you're just looking for a good headphone like the Maxwell, you don't need to buy anything. It's already included inside there, right? So you just need to spend $300 and you're good to go. And so for most people, the Maxwell is a better value, and the thing I'm going to recommend for most people is going to be Maxwell. But you know, for MM-100, you kind of know if you want it or not, I think. But yeah. Anyways, in my next video, I'm going to be comparing the Audeze to my HiFiMan HE6 SCV2. So it's going to be kind of like an open back planar from HiFiMan versus Audeze and see how that compares. I think that'll be a very interesting video. I think a lot of people will be interested in that. Now, I bought my HiFiMan for like $600. This is like $400. So the price range is a little bit different. But then again, the HiFiMan headphone also went on sale for like $400 at one point. So it's kind of a pretty close price point comparison. So we'll see how that one shakes out. Anyways, please subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.